Alex Mitchell needed silence, the kind that pressed in from all sides, absolute and profound. The city was a cacophony of demands, shattering the fragile concentration needed to wrestle the final chapters of a difficult novel into existence. An online listing promised sanctuary, a stark, minimalist house, isolated geographically and aesthetically. Its primary draw, beyond the promised quiet, was a single, completely empty room mentioned almost as an afterthought in the description. For Alex, struggling with the daunting emptiness of the blank page, this vacant space felt less like a void and more like a possibility, a perfect, undisturbed canvas for thought. Let's begin the story. Get comfortable and listen closely. The crunch of tires on the long gravel driveway was the last punctuation mark on a sentence Alex had been writing for months, the escape clause. Shutting off the engine plunged the world into a quiet so deep it felt less like the absence of noise and more like a presence in itself. Alex stepped out of the car, the air crisp and tasting vaguely of pine needles and damp earth. Before them stood the house, less a home and more an architectural statement against the encroaching wilderness. It wasn't large, but its lines were severe, uncompromising. White rendered walls met flat rooflines with geometric precision. Windows were large, unadorned rectangles, reflecting the pale, overcast sky like impassive eyes. There was no garden to speak of, just neatly raked gravel surrounding the foundation, transitioning abruptly into the untamed woods that pressed close on three sides. It was exactly as the minimalist listing photos had promised, stark, clean, isolated. Perfect. Inside, the theme continued. Polished concrete floors gleamed faintly under recessed lighting. Walls were uniformly white, unbroken by pictures or decorations. The furniture was functional, sparse, and chosen for its lack of personality: a simple gray sofa, a glass-topped dining table with four austere chairs, a bed frame that was little more than a platform. It felt less lived in and more curated, like a gallery exhibit on the theme of modern solitude. Alex did a slow walk through, the sound of their footsteps echoing slightly in the stillness. Kitchen, stainless steel counters, integrated appliances hidden behind seamless white panels. Living area, sofa, single floor lamp, empty bookshelf bolted to the wall. Bedroom, bed, small built-in closet. Bathroom, white tiles, chrome fixtures, a mirror that reflected only Alex and the blank wall opposite. Everything was ruthlessly pared down, designed to eliminate distraction. And then, there was the other room. It was located off the main hallway, halfway between the living area and the bedroom. Its door was identical to the others, plain white, flush-mounted, with a simple brushed steel handle. Alex paused before it, a flicker of something, curiosity, perhaps anticipation, stirring within. This was the room highlighted in the rental agreement almost apologetically. Please note, one room is kept intentionally unfurnished. Alex turned the handle. The door swung inward silently, revealing a space that was the epitome of absence. It was roughly square, perhaps 12 feet by 12 feet. The walls were the same flat white as the rest of the house, the floor the same polished concrete. There was a single window, identical in size and shape to the others, looking out into the dense wall of trees at the back of the property. But unlike the other rooms, this one contained absolutely nothing. No furniture, no rug, no light fixture hanging from the ceiling, only a blank white plate where one might have been, no marks on the walls, no scuffs on the floor. It was pristine, untouched, profoundly empty. Standing in the doorway, Alex felt a strange sense of calm descend. The silence within the room seemed different, purer, heavier. It wasn't just quiet, it was void. The air felt still, undisturbed. Alex had anticipated finding the emptiness perhaps slightly odd, even a little wasteful, but instead, it felt intentional, purposeful. They stepped inside, their shoes making no sound on the smooth concrete. The light from the window was diffuse, gray, illuminating the sheer lack of anything to see. Alex ran a hand along one cool, smooth wall. It felt solid, real. They looked up at the ceiling, down at the floor. Nothing. Just space. This wasn't just an empty room, it was the empty room. A space stripped bare of function, history, or expectation. For a writer struggling to fill pages, staring down the barrel of a narrative that refused to cohere, this felt unexpectedly right. It was a blank canvas, yes, but more than that. It was a space for the mind to expand into, unburdened by objects or associations. A place to simply be with the silence, to let thoughts settle or dissipate without snagging on the clutter of the world. Alex backed out slowly, pulling the door almost closed, leaving just a crack. A small smile touched their lips. The city, the noise, the pressure, it all felt miles away, irrelevant. Here, surrounded by deliberate emptiness, perhaps the words would finally come. The profound quiet of the house was a balm, and the empty room, far from being a strange anomaly, felt like its heart, a silent, waiting core. Relief washed over Alex, clean and sharp as the house itself. This was the place. The perfect, undisturbed vacuum where creativity could finally breathe. The stillness felt like potential, the emptiness like freedom. For now, at least, the blank canvas held only promise. The first few days unfolded with a quiet rhythm that Alex hadn't experienced in years. Mornings began not with the jolt of an alarm clock or the rumble of traffic, but with the gradual brightening of the sky through the large, uncurtained windows. The silence was the first thing Alex noticed upon waking, a thick, insulating blanket that muffled even the sound of their own breathing. Coffee was brewed in a minimalist machine that hissed discreetly. Breakfast was eaten at the glass table, staring out at the unchanging wall of trees, their leaves barely rustling in the still air. Then, the laptop would be opened, the blank document mirroring the starkness of the house itself. Alex established a routine quickly. Writing from morning until early afternoon, breaking for a simple lunch, then perhaps a walk along the gravel driveway or a brief foray into the edge of the woods, careful not to stray too far. The afternoons were for reading, research, or simply sitting on the gray sofa, letting the quiet seep in. Evenings involved simple meals and early bedtimes. There was no television, and the internet connection, while functional, was slow enough to discourage mindless browsing. The isolation was total, self-imposed, and initially, deeply productive. Words began to flow. Not a torrent, but a steady trickle, enough to make progress on the stalled novel. The characters started breathing again, the plot untangling itself slowly under the focused pressure of uninterrupted thought. Alex attributed it to the lack of distraction, the sheer mental space afforded by the minimalist environment. The house was working its intended magic. The empty room remained mostly out of sight, out of mind. Alex kept its door firmly closed, treating it as simply another part of the house's structure, a space irrelevant to their purpose. Why dwell on an empty space when there was work to be done, a narrative void to fill? Yet, subtly, almost imperceptibly, Alex began to notice things about the silence. The quiet in the rest of the house was profound, yes, but it felt normal. It was the quiet of isolation, the absence of external stimuli. But the silence associated with the empty room felt different. When walking down the hallway past its closed door, the ambient stillness seemed to deepen, to become denser. It was as if the room wasn't just empty of objects, but actively absorbing sound, pulling the quiet towards itself. At first, Alex dismissed this feeling. It was subjective, easily explained away. The acoustics of the house were unusual, perhaps. The concrete floors and bare walls likely played tricks with sound waves. Or maybe it was just projection, the mind, starved of input, starting to invent nuances in the silence. It was easy to rationalize. The house was old, despite its modern interior renovation. Perhaps it had its quirks, drafts that created odd pressure differentials, floorboards settling in the deep quiet. One afternoon, while Alex was trying to focus on a particularly tricky passage of dialogue, a faint creak echoed from the hallway. It sounded like a footstep on wood, but the floors were concrete. Alex froze, listening intently. Silence rushed back in, thick and absolute. Nothing followed. A settling noise, surely. Houses make noises, especially quiet ones where every tiny sound is amplified. Alex forced their attention back to the screen, typing determinedly. Later that evening, while washing dishes in the near-silent kitchen, Alex heard it again. A soft, almost inaudible tap, seeming to come from the direction of the empty room's wall. Just one tap. Alex turned off the water, straining to hear. Only the low hum of the refrigerator broke the stillness. Imagination. Hyper-awareness born of isolation. Stress manifesting in auditory flickers. Alex listed the rational explanations mentally, ticking them off one by one. But the sensation persisted, that the quality of silence near the empty room was different. It felt heavier, more deliberate. It wasn't a passive absence of noise, but an active, pressing quietude. It was like comparing the silence of an empty theater to the silence of outer space. One was merely unoccupied, the other was a fundamental void. Alex found himself glancing towards the closed door of the empty room more often, a fleeting, involuntary action. There was no reason to. It was just a room. An empty room. But the thought of its perfect, undisturbed emptiness began to occupy a small, persistent corner of Alex's mind. What did it look like in there right now, with the door closed. Exactly the same as when they'd first looked inside, of course. Unchanging. Still. Empty. The productivity continued, the word count grew, but a tiny thread of unease had been woven into the fabric of the quiet. It was barely perceptible, easily ignored most of the time, but it was there. A dissonant note in the symphony of silence. The house was settling, Alex told himself. They were simply adjusting to a level of quiet they hadn't experienced before. It was nothing. Just the sound of emptiness settling in. It happened on a Tuesday morning, gray and damp like most mornings had been since Alex arrived. The writing had gone surprisingly well the previous day, a difficult plot point had finally clicked into place, and Alex had gone to bed feeling a sense of accomplishment, the quiet of the house feeling less like pressure and more like a supportive cocoon. Waking naturally, Alex followed the usual routine, coffee, a quiet breakfast overlooking the mist-shrouded woods. Then, heading down the hallway towards the living area to start the day's work, Alex stopped dead. The door to the empty room was open. Not wide open, but ajar, cracked by about 6 inches. Alex stared at it, heart giving an uncomfortable little jump. That wasn't right. Alex distinctly remembered closing it firmly after that first initial inspection upon arrival. They had made a conscious effort not to engage with the room, keeping it sealed off, conceptually and physically. They hadn't touched it since day one. Maybe a draft? Alex considered this, scanning the hallway. The house was well sealed, modernized. There were no rattling windows, no perceptible airflow. And the door hadn't just blown open, it was resting slightly ajar, as if someone had pushed it gently and left it that way. Forgetfulness? Had Alex somehow sleepwalked, or opened it in a moment of distraction yesterday and forgotten? It seemed unlikely. Alex's routine was methodical, focused. Opening that specific door served no purpose and didn't fit any pattern. With a growing sense of unease, Alex walked slowly towards the door and pushed it fully open. The room beyond was exactly as remembered, bare white walls, polished concrete floor, the single window showing the gray, indifferent trees. Nothing had changed. Nothing had been disturbed because there was nothing to disturb. It was still perfectly, profoundly empty. Alex stepped inside, compelled to check despite the obvious lack of possibilities. They ran a hand along the wall nearest the door, looked up at the ceiling plate, down at the seamless floor. Empty. Silent. Still. The air inside felt cool and heavy, the silence pressing in, almost muffling the sound of Alex's own breathing. There was no rational explanation, other than Alex's own faulty memory or a highly unusual, localized draft strong enough to pull open a flush-fitting door but not disturb anything else. Neither felt satisfying. Alex backed out, pulling the door firmly shut, listening for the click of the latch engaging. It seemed secure. Shaking their head, trying to dispel the prickling sensation on the back of their neck, Alex continued to the living area and sat down at the laptop. But the focus of the previous days was fractured. The image of the slightly open door intruded. Who, or what, could have opened it? The absurdity of the question was unsettling. There was no one else here. The house was miles from the nearest neighbor. Alex had locked the main doors the night before, as always. It had to be forgetfulness. Stress, isolation, they could play tricks on the mind, couldn't they? Make you doubt your own actions. Alex must have opened it for some reason and simply forgotten. Annoyed at this lapse, Alex tried to force their attention onto the manuscript. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The empty room was no longer just a passively empty space. The incident, however minor and likely explainable, had drawn Alex's attention to it, made it a focal point. Throughout the day, Alex found their gaze drifting towards the hallway, towards the closed white door. Was it still closed? Had it moved again? Several times, Alex got up and walked down the hallway just to check. Each time, the door was exactly as they had left it, firmly shut. Yet, peering through the crack before closing it again, or just standing outside it, Alex began to experience a new sensation. It wasn't quite the feeling of being watched from the room, there was nothing in there to watch. It was subtler, stranger. It felt like the room itself was aware. An inanimate space shouldn't have presence, but this one seemed to hum with a latent attention, the emptiness itself watchful. Alex tried to laugh it off. The room is watching me? Seriously? Uttering the thought aloud felt ridiculous, paranoid. It had to be the isolation, the pressure of the novel. Alex was projecting anxieties onto the most neutral object available, the empty room. It was a psychological quirk, nothing more. But the unease lingered. The incident with the door, small as it was, had shifted something. The perfect, productive silence of the house now felt charged with a low-level static of uncertainty. And the empty room, once a symbol of potential, was starting to feel like a question mark hanging unanswered in the quiet solitude. Alex found themselves consciously avoiding walking past the door unless necessary, a detour easily made in the small house, but a detour nonetheless. The blank canvas was beginning to show a faint, unsettling texture. The laptop screen flickered to life, resolving into the familiar, calm face of Dr. Lena Hansen. Her office background was softly lit, featuring reassuring bookshelves and a thriving green plant, a stark contrast to Alex's minimalist surroundings. "Alex," Dr. Hansen began, her voice clear through the speakers, a welcome anchor of normalcy. "Good to see you. How has the change of scenery been treating you? Finding the quiet productive?" Alex managed a small smile, adjusting the laptop angle on the glass dining table. "Hi, Lena. Yes, mostly. The writing is moving. Slowly, but it's definitely better than it was in the city. The quiet helps. A lot." "That's good to hear," Dr. Hansen said, her gaze observant. "You mentioned wanting extreme quiet. It sounds like you found it." "Oh, I found it," Alex chuckled, a dry sound. "This place is silent on a whole other level. You can hear yourself think. Sometimes, maybe too clearly." Dr. Hansen picked up on the subtle shift in tone. "Too clearly? How so?" Alex hesitated, swirling the condensation on their water glass. How to explain the formless unease without sounding completely irrational? "It's just. The silence here is very intense. Profound. Sometimes it feels less like an absence of noise and more like a presence. If that makes any sense." "It makes sense in the context of significant environmental change," Dr. Hansen replied smoothly. "Moving from constant urban stimulus to near total isolation is a shock to the system. Your senses are recalibrating. Things you wouldn't normally notice, the hum of the fridge, the house settling, become amplified." I know, Alex said quickly. "And mostly, it's fine. Productive, like I said. But there's this one room in the house." Alex trailed off, unsure how to phrase it. "The empty one you mentioned when you were considering the rental?" Dr. Hansen prompted gently. "Yeah, that one. It's strange." Alex leaned closer to the screen, lowering their voice slightly, though there was no one else to hear. "It's completely bare. Nothing in it. But the silence in there feels different. Deeper. Heavier." Alex recounted the incident with the door being ajar, emphasizing how certain they were about having closed it. "Logically, I know I must have forgotten, or it was a weird draft. But it felt deliberate." Dr. Hansen listened patiently, making occasional notes. "And how did that make you feel?" "Uneasy," Alex admitted. "A little paranoid, honestly. Which is ridiculous. It's an empty room. But since then, I keep noticing it. Feeling like it's watching me. Not that there's anything in there, but the room itself. The emptiness." Alex shook their head, frustrated. "It sounds crazy saying it out loud." "It doesn't sound crazy, Alex, it sounds like you're under a lot of pressure," Dr. Hansen said calmly. "You've isolated yourself to tackle a difficult creative project that you've described as feeling blocked on, feeling empty of ideas, perhaps? It's not uncommon to project those internal feelings onto our environment, especially when that environment is unfamiliar or unusual." "So you think I'm projecting my writer's block onto the empty room?" Alex asked, wanting to believe the simple explanation. "It's a strong possibility," Dr. Hansen affirmed. "The room represents a void, a lack of content. Your novel, before you started making progress again, might have felt like a similar void you were struggling to fill. Your anxiety about the novel, about productivity, about perhaps failing to fill that creative space, could easily manifest as unease directed towards a literal empty space. The feeling of being watched could be your own critical inner voice, externalized." Alex considered this. It felt plausible, neat. A tidy psychological box to put the strange feelings in. "And the door? Stress and preoccupation can absolutely affect memory," Dr. Hansen said. "Or it could simply have been a draft. Houses settle, air pressure changes. Isolation can make us hyper-aware of small anomalies and assign them undue significance." "Okay," Alex said slowly, nodding. "Okay, that makes sense." Rationally, it did. It was the explanation Alex had been searching for. "The key," Dr. Hansen continued, "is to acknowledge the feeling without letting it take control. When you feel that unease about the room, remind yourself of the likely psychological explanation. Recognize it as a manifestation of stress or creative anxiety. Then, gently redirect your focus back to your writing, or take a break, step outside, engage your senses in the reality around you. Don't dwell on the room. Right. Don't dwell, Alex echoed, trying to internalize the advice. Are you sleeping well? Eating properly? Maintaining some form of routine? Dr. Hansen inquired. Mostly, Alex confirmed, omitting the slightly disturbed sleep that had begun recently, the vague dreams of vast, empty spaces. The routine is solid. Good. Keep focusing on the work, manage your stress levels. Perhaps try incorporating some mindfulness exercises if the feeling of being watched persists, grounding yourself in the present moment, focusing on your breathing, the physical sensations in your body. Treat the unease as a signal from your mind about stress, not as an external threat. The rest of the session covered coping mechanisms for stress and creative pressure. Alex felt a measure of relief afterwards. Dr. Hansen's calm rationality had imposed order on the creeping strangeness. It was just projection. Stress. Isolation. Manageable things. Yet, as Alex closed the laptop, plunging the dining area back into silence, their eyes were drawn involuntarily down the hallway towards the closed white door. The rational explanation felt comforting, intellectually sound. But deep down, a small, persistent flicker of doubt remained. The feeling emanating from that direction. It didn't feel like stress. It felt like something else. Something cold, still, and attentively empty. Despite Dr. Hansen's reassuring logic, the empty room refused to fade back into insignificance. Rational explanations warred with the persistent, visceral sense of unease it provoked. Alex tried to follow the advice, acknowledge the feeling as stress, then redirect, but found it increasingly difficult. The room exerted a subtle gravitational pull on Alex's attention. Instead of strictly avoiding it, Alex found himself drawn to observe it, albeit cautiously. Not entering, usually, but pausing at the closed door, listening intently to the profound silence within. Or, more often now, pushing the door open just a crack and peering inside, as if checking on a sleeping, potentially dangerous creature. What Alex saw was always the same, nothing. Perfect, unwavering emptiness. This very lack of change began to take on a disturbing quality. The rest of the house, minimalist as it was, showed subtle signs of Alex's presence: a cup left on the counter, a book face down on the sofa arm, the indentation on the bed pillow. These small markers of life felt normal, comforting. But the empty room remained pristine, immutable. Dust didn't seem to settle on its polished concrete floor. Sunlight, when it broke through the overcast sky, would slant through the window, illuminating the bare walls and floor, highlighting the sheer absence of anything to cast a complex shadow. Alex started spending small increments of time just staring into the void from the doorway, trying to understand the source of the discomfort. Was it the quality of the light? The window faced the densest part of the woods, and the light filtering through the trees often had a flat, greenish-gray quality that felt strangely sterile. Was it the texture of the walls? They were painted a flat white, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, making the corners seem slightly indistinct, swallowing shadows. Or was it the stillness? The air inside felt unnaturally static. Alex imagined holding a feather just inside the doorway. Surely it would hang perfectly motionless, suspended in the thick, unbreathing quiet. The silence wasn't just deep, it felt ancient, primordial. Alex began to notice minute details within the nothingness, the mind desperately seeking something to latch onto. The faint pattern in the poured concrete floor, almost invisible unless the light hit it just right. The precise right angles where the walls met the floor and ceiling. The way the white paint seemed to absorb sound, contributing to that heavy, pressing silence. The act of observation became almost compulsive. Alex would stand there, cataloging the emptiness, searching for any minute alteration, any flicker of change that might either confirm or deny the growing sense of wrongness. But there was never anything. The room remained a constant, a perfect vacuum within the house. This unchanging nature became, paradoxically, the most unsettling thing about it. It felt less like a neglected space and more like a deliberately maintained state. An emptiness that was actively being empty, resisting the natural inclination of spaces to accumulate dust, echoes, history. It felt curated, preserved in its pristine void. Alex tried to frame it differently. It was a Zen space. A meditative void. A minimalist statement. But these labels felt thin, inadequate descriptions for the feeling it evoked. The room didn't feel peaceful, it felt watchful. It didn't feel calm. It felt tense, like a held breath. The feeling that the room itself possessed a form of awareness intensified. Standing in the doorway, staring into the blankness, Alex often felt a prickling sensation, as if unseen eyes were fixed upon them from within the void. Not eyes belonging to a creature or entity, there was nothing there, but the awareness of the space itself, the focused attention of the emptiness. It was absurd. Rooms don't watch. Emptiness doesn't possess consciousness. Alex knew this. Yet, the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each observation. The room felt less like an absence and more like a powerful, negative presence. A deliberate, condensed nullity. The writing suffered. Hours previously spent productively at the laptop were now punctuated by these periods of obsessive observation. Alex would be deep in a paragraph, only to find their focus drifting, their gaze pulled towards the hallway, the unanswered question of the empty room demanding attention. The blank page on the screen started to feel less like potential and more like a reflection of that unnerving void down the hall. The room wasn't just a distraction, it was beginning to feel like a drain, siphoning off Alex's focus and mental energy into its silent, unchanging depths. The blank canvas was no longer inspiring, it was becoming intimidating, its perfect emptiness a mocking counterpoint to Alex's faltering creative efforts. The silence of the house, once a source of comfort and focus, was becoming increasingly unreliable. It wasn't that the quiet itself lessened, but that it seemed to serve as a canvas for tiny, almost imperceptible sounds that hovered at the edge of hearing, sounds that always seemed localized near the empty room, yet never definitively within it. It started subtly. A faint creak from the floorboards in the hallway, just outside the empty room's door. Alex would freeze, listening, heart thudding against ribs. Silence would answer. It could easily be the house settling, the temperature fluctuating. Concrete floors didn't creak, but perhaps the subfloor, or the door frame settling against the wall? Plausible. Deniable. Then came a low, intermittent hum. Almost subsonic, felt more than heard, like the vibration of a distant, idling engine. Alex traced it, walking slowly through the house, pressing an ear against walls. It seemed strongest on the wall shared between the hallway and the empty room. But inside the room itself? Silence. Absolute, unwavering silence. Alex checked the fuse box, the heating system, which was off, the refrigerator. None matched the frequency or location. The hum would fade as inexplicably as it arrived, leaving Alex questioning whether it had been real at all. One evening, sitting on the sofa trying to read, Alex heard a faint scritching sound. Like fingernails lightly drawn across drywall. It seemed to come from the hallway, near the empty room's threshold. Alex muted the non-existent TV, straining to hear. The sound stopped instantly. Waiting, holding their breath, Alex heard nothing but the low thrum of their own blood pulsing in their ears. Mice? Unlikely in such a modernized, sealed structure, but possible. Yet the sound hadn't had the erratic, scurrying quality of rodents. It had been slow, deliberate. And it didn't repeat. These incidents were always brief, always ambiguous. Never loud enough or sustained enough to be undeniable. They existed in the liminal space between perception and imagination, perfectly calibrated to feed paranoia. Was Alex's hearing becoming hypersensitive due to the profound quiet, picking up normal house sounds and misinterpreting them? Or was something subtly disturbing the stillness near that specific room? The ambiguity was maddening. If there were loud bangs, distinct voices, clear footsteps inside the room, it would almost be a relief. That would be something tangible, something to react to, proof that the fear wasn't just internal. But these faint, peripheral sounds offered no such certainty. They only deepened the mystery in Alex's self-doubt. The sounds seemed to imply movement, presence, just outside the empty space. Was something trying to get into the room? Or perhaps, more chillingly, was something within the profound emptiness subtly affecting the space around it, like a gravitational anomaly warping the fabric of the house? Alex started documenting the sounds, noting the time, location, and description in a small notebook kept beside the laptop. 2:17 p.m., faint creak, hallway floor near rear door. House settling? 9:03 p.m., low hum, shared wall. Lasted approximately 30 seconds. Origin unclear. 11:45 p.m., soft tap, like knuckle on doorframe, outside ER. Single occurrence. 4:12 a.m., possible whispering sound? Very faint, indecipherable. Could be wind, though none audible. Reading the list back felt like cataloging the descent into obsession. The entries were vague, uncertain. Proof of nothing but Alex's own heightened anxiety. Yet the pattern seemed undeniable, the sounds always clustered around the empty room. The most disturbing auditory phenomenon was perhaps the subtlest. Sometimes, standing near the closed door, Alex perceived a faint shift in air pressure, a momentary feeling of fullness in the ears, as if something large and silent had moved just on the other side. There was no accompanying sound, just the physical sensation, fleeting and impossible to verify. Sleep offered little respite. The faint sounds sometimes bled into the edges of dreams, morphing into indistinct whispers or the soft tread of unseen feet pacing just outside a familiar, empty space. Alex began sleeping more lightly, waking at the slightest creak or sigh from the house, straining to listen into the oppressive darkness. The rational mind insisted: isolation, stress, hyper-awareness. The house was old beneath its modern skin, it made noises. The empty room was just a room. But the persistent, localized nature of the sounds, coupled with the unchanging, watchful void within the room itself, created a narrative of unease that grew harder to dismiss with each passing day. Something felt fundamentally wrong about that corner of the house, and the silence it held was beginning to feel less like peace and more like a tightly coiled thread. Just as the unsettling sounds and the room's oppressive stillness began to truly dominate Alex's thoughts, an email arrived. It was from Silas Croft, the owner of the house, a man Alex had never met, having dealt entirely through a remote property management agency. The agency had mentioned Croft was reclusive and preferred minimal contact, hence the sparse communication during the rental process. The email subject line was simply, "Regarding your tenancy." Alex opened it with a flicker of apprehension, wondering if there was a problem, or perhaps just a routine check-in. The message itself was brief, typed in a plain, unadorned font, lacking any standard salutation or closing pleasantries. Tenant. It has come to my attention that the property is currently occupied. This is accordance with the agreement. Ensure the integrity of the environment is maintained. The quiet has requirements. The stillness serves a purpose. There are spaces that benefit from lack of interference. Minimalist principles extend beyond aesthetics. Respect the balance. Do not seek to alter fundamental vacancies. Further communication is unnecessary unless protocols are breached. Croft. Alex read the email 3 times, each reading deepening a sense of bewilderment and unease. It wasn't overtly threatening, yet it felt deeply unsettling. The quiet has requirements? The stillness serves a purpose? Respect the balance? Do not seek to alter fundamental vacancies? The language was stilted, impersonal, almost philosophical, yet disturbingly specific in its vagueness. Fundamental vacancies, could that refer to anything other than the empty room? It seemed unlikely, given the house's otherwise functional minimalism. Croft seemed to be issuing a warning, disguised as instruction. What protocols could be breached? What was the purpose of the stillness? And why the explicit instruction not to alter vacancies? Was Croft aware of Alex's growing preoccupation with the empty room? Impossible. Alex hadn't communicated with anyone except Dr. Hansen about it, and certainly not the landlord or the agency. Unless Croft knew something inherent about the room. Unless his instruction wasn't based on Alex's current behavior, but on the room's intrinsic nature, or perhaps his own past experiences within the house. The email hinted that the emptiness wasn't accidental, or merely a matter of furnishing preference. It was deliberate, maintained for a reason Croft seemed unwilling or unable to articulate clearly. Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the house's temperature. Croft's reclusiveness suddenly felt less like eccentricity and more like something else, self-preservation, perhaps? Had he lived here? Had he experienced the same unnerving sensations emanating from the empty room? Was keeping it empty his way of managing? Whatever it was? The email added a significant layer to Alex's growing paranoia. It suggested an external validation, however cryptic, for the feeling that the room was not just empty, but meant to be empty, and that disturbing this emptiness might have consequences. The phrase "respect the balance" echoed ominously. What balance? The balance between sound and silence? Between presence and absence? Or the balance of Alex's own mind, already destabilized by the room's influence? Alex considered replying, asking for clarification. What did he mean by requirements, purpose, balance? But the final line, "Further communication is unnecessary unless protocols are breached," felt like a clear deterrent. Croft did not invite dialogue. He issued pronouncements from his seclusion. Alex saved the email, rereading it periodically throughout the day. Each word seemed freighted with hidden meaning. Integrity of the environment, lack of interference, minimalist principles extend beyond aesthetics. It sounded like lines from some obscure manifesto. Was Croft a strange philosopher? A cultist of emptiness? Or simply an odd landlord with poor communication skills? The ambiguity was almost worse than an outright warning. It fed the uncertainty, allowing Alex's already heightened anxiety to fill in the blanks with increasingly disturbing possibilities. Croft's message transformed the empty room from a potentially unsettling architectural feature into something guarded, something with unspoken rules and a hidden significance. Why keep it empty? Why warn against altering it? The questions circled relentlessly in Alex's mind, pushing thoughts of the novel further into the background. The landlord's strange communication didn't solve anything, it only deepened the mystery, making the house feel less like a neutral container and more like a carefully constructed environment designed around the preservation of that central, silent void. And Alex, the tenant, felt less like a resident and more like an unwitting participant in an experiment whose parameters were deliberately obscured. The cryptic words resonated with the unsettling sounds and the watchful stillness, weaving together into a tapestry of quiet dread. The subtle feeling of being watched by the room began to coalesce into something far more disturbing, the distinct sensation of a presence within the emptiness itself. It wasn't a visual phenomenon. Peering into the room, even stepping tentatively across the threshold, revealed the same unwavering void. Bare walls, bare floor, indifferent window. Logically, empirically, the room was empty. But the feeling contradicted the visual evidence with unnerving certainty. It manifested as a weight, an invisible pressure building within the confines of the room. Standing in the hallway near the door, Alex could feel it, a heavy, static presence pressing against the other side. It felt dense, condensed, as if the silence itself had mass and volume. It wasn't malevolent, necessarily, not yet. It was simply there. A concentration of nothingness that felt paradoxically like something. This feeling intensified over time. What started as a vague sense of occupancy became a near-palpable presence. Alex began actively avoiding the section of the hallway outside the room. Walking past the closed door felt like walking past a cage holding a large, silent predator. The dread emanating from the emptiness was palpable, a cold wave that washed over Alex's skin. Even with the door firmly shut, the presence seemed to leak out, subtly altering the atmosphere of the house. The general quiet no longer felt peaceful, but dense, expectant. Alex found himself constantly glancing towards the empty room's door, anticipating. What? A sound? A movement? The door suddenly flying open? The anticipation itself was exhausting, a constant low hum of anxiety beneath the surface of everyday actions. The presence felt watchful. Intensely so. Alex couldn't shake the feeling of being observed, not by eyes, but by the concentrated void itself. It felt like the room was aware of Alex's every move, every thought, listening not with ears but with its profound, absorbent silence. Croft's cryptic email echoed, "The stillness serves a purpose." Was this it? To observe? To influence? Sleep became increasingly fragmented. The vague dreams of empty spaces grew more specific, more oppressive. Alex dreamed of standing in the empty room, the walls seeming to stretch infinitely upwards, the silence so profound it felt like drowning. Sometimes, in the dream, Alex would feel that heavy presence coalescing in the center of the room, an invisible vortex of nothingness that pulled at their consciousness. They would wake up gasping, heart pounding, the silence of the actual bedroom feeling thin and fragile compared to the crushing void of the dream. During waking hours, Alex tried to rationalize the sensation. It was pareidolia of the senses, the mind creating patterns and presence out of sensory deprivation. The isolation was clearly taking a toll, blurring the lines between internal anxiety and external perception. Dr. Hansen's words about projection echoed, but felt increasingly inadequate to explain the sheer physical weight of the feeling emanating from the room. One afternoon, driven by a mix of fear and a desperate need for empirical proof, Alex took a deep breath and pushed the empty room's door fully open, stepping decisively inside. The immediate sensation was overwhelming, like stepping into a zone of immense pressure, the air thick and resistant. The silence crashed down, absolute and deafening. The feeling of the presence was everywhere, emanating not from a specific point, but from the entirety of the void surrounding Alex. It felt like being inside the heart of a vast, indifferent entity composed entirely of absence. Alex stood frozen in the center of the room for perhaps 30 seconds, every nerve ending screaming. Nothing happened. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Yet the oppressive weight, the feeling of intense, silent scrutiny, was unbearable. Alex stumbled backwards out of the room, pulling the door shut with trembling hands, leaning against the hallway wall, gasping for breath as if having surfaced from deep water. That brief immersion solidified the paranoia. Rational explanations felt flimsy, irrelevant in the face of such a powerful, visceral experience. Something was in the room, defined not by its presence, but by its total absence, by the sheer, concentrated power of its emptiness. It wasn't just a room anymore. It was a focal point of dread, a silent, watchful entity inhabiting the heart of the house, its influence slowly but surely seeping into Alex's mind. The line between observation and obsession was dissolving, replaced by a consuming fear of the void itself. The oppressive presence emanating from the empty room became intolerable. Alex reasoned, with a logic born more of desperation than rationality, that if the emptiness was the source of the horror, then perhaps disrupting that emptiness was the solution. If the void could be filled, even partially, perhaps its power, its watchful intensity, would dissipate. The first attempt was simple. Alex retrieved the austere chair from the dining area, a lightweight piece of metal and plastic, and carried it purposefully down the hallway. Pushing the empty room's door open, taking a deep breath against the familiar wave of silent pressure, Alex stepped inside and placed the chair directly in the center of the concrete floor. It looked absurd. Small, insignificant, swallowed by the stark white walls and the sheer volume of the surrounding emptiness. The chair, designed for function, seemed utterly alien in this space devoid of purpose. It didn't diminish the room's oppressive atmosphere, if anything, it highlighted it. The emptiness seemed to press in around the solitary object, emphasizing its isolation, its triviality. The presence didn't recede, it felt almost irritated, the stillness disturbed but not broken. Alex backed out, leaving the door open, and observed from the hallway. The chair sat there, a lonely island in a sea of void. It didn't look like a piece of furniture in a room, it looked like an exhibit. Object in hostile environment. The feeling of being watched intensified, as if the room's attention was now focused on this unwelcome intrusion. After an hour of glancing nervously down the hall at the static tableau, Alex couldn't stand it anymore. Striding back into the room, ignoring the prickling sense of intrusion, Alex snatched up the chair and returned it to the dining table, slamming the empty room's door shut with more force than intended. The silence that followed felt heavier, more charged. The failure of the first attempt only fueled Alex's resolve. Maybe a single object wasn't enough. Maybe the room needed function. The next day, Alex decided to try writing inside the room. It seemed logical: confront the source of the anxiety, reclaim the space, make it productive. Alex brought in the small, minimalist desk lamp from the bedside table, placing it on the floor near one wall. Then, carrying the laptop, Alex returned, hesitated at the threshold, and forced themselves to sit on the polished concrete floor, back against the cool wall, laptop balanced on their knees. The moment Alex settled, the wrongness of it was overwhelming. The artificial light from the lamp felt harsh, intrusive, casting sharp, unfamiliar shadows that seemed to writhe slightly in the periphery of vision. The familiar glow of the laptop screen seemed weak, fragile against the profound darkness that clung to the corners of the room. The silence wasn't just silence, it was a crushing weight that made focusing on the words impossible. The oppressive presence felt closer, more invasive, pressing in from all sides. It felt like trying to work inside a vacuum chamber that was scrutinizing every keystroke. Alex typed a few sentences, the words feeling forced, hollow. The cursor blinked on the screen, a tiny point of light in the overwhelming emptiness. The feeling of being watched was suffocating. Every breath felt loud, intrusive. The slight hum of the laptop fan seemed like a roar in the profound stillness. Alex's own thoughts felt scattered, infiltrated by the room's heavy silence, anxieties blooming like toxic mold. After perhaps 10 minutes that felt like an hour, Alex scrambled up, grabbing the lamp and the laptop, almost tripping in their haste to escape. Back in the relative normality of the living area, heart pounding, Alex realized the attempt had been a disastrous failure. Trying to impose function, purpose, or even simple objects onto the empty room didn't diminish its power, it amplified the sense of violation, both Alex's and the room's. The room seemed to actively resist being filled. Its emptiness wasn't passive, it was fiercely protective of its void state. The objects, once removed, left no trace. The room instantly reverted to its pristine, absolute emptiness, the oppressive presence settling back into its watchful stillness, perhaps even stronger now, as if agitated by the attempted intrusion. Alex felt defeated, and more frightened than before. The rational, controllable solutions weren't working. The room wasn't behaving like a normal space. Its emptiness felt like a fundamental property, an unalterable state that rejected interference. The attempt to fill the void had only served to reinforce its profound, unsettling power, convincing Alex more deeply of the room's unnatural quality and deepening the paranoia that was rapidly consuming their thoughts. The blank canvas wasn't just resistant, it felt actively hostile to the touch. The video call connected, Dr. Hansen's calm face appearing on the screen. This time, Alex didn't bother trying to appear composed. The strain was evident, dark circles under the eyes, a nervous energy in the way Alex fidgeted, constantly glancing over their shoulder towards the hallway. "Alex," Dr. Hansen began, her professional smile softening with concern. "You sounded distressed in your email requesting this session sooner. How are things?" "Not good, Lena," Alex said, the words tumbling out in a rush. It's the room. The empty room. It's getting worse. Much worse. Worse in what way? Dr. Hansen asked gently, her therapist's mask firmly in place, though her eyes showed genuine worry. Tell me what's been happening. Alex took a shaky breath and recounted the escalating experiences, the constant feeling of a heavy presence within the room's emptiness, the failed attempts to fill the space and how it seemed to resist Croft's unsettlingly cryptic email. It's not just projection, Lena. I know you think it's stress, but it feels real. The presence in there, it's palpable. Heavy. Watchful. Dr. Hansen listened intently, her expression unreadable. You mentioned the feeling of presence before, Alex. Has anything changed about that specific sensation? Alex hesitated, then plunged ahead. My perception. I think it's getting distorted. When I look into the room now, I try not to, but sometimes I have to check. I see things. Not hallucinations, exactly. Not yet. But movements. Fleeting things in the corners of my eyes. Like the shadows aren't quite still. They seem to deepen or shift when I'm not looking directly at them. Alex leaned closer to the screen, voice dropping to a near whisper. And the light. The way the light falls through the window. Sometimes it looks wrong. Too sharp, or too flat. And the corners of the room. They seem indistinct, like the geometry isn't quite stable. It's subtle, I know it sounds crazy, but the room doesn't feel static anymore. Even though it's always empty when I look properly. Dr. Hansen remained calm, but her gaze sharpened. Alex, these perceptual disturbances, the shifting shadows, the changes in light and geometry, combined with the intensified paranoia and the feeling of a presence, are significant indicators. How much sleep have you been getting, honestly? Not much, Alex admitted miserably. The dreams are bad. And I keep hearing things, small sounds near the room. It's hard to rest. The isolation, Dr. Hansen said, her tone becoming more clinical, while initially sought for concentration, can have profound psychological effects, especially when combined with high stress, sleep deprivation, and pre-existing anxiety, which you've managed well in the past but might be resurfacing under these conditions. So you still think it's just me? My mind playing tricks? Alex asked, a note of desperation creeping in. I think the environment, the extreme isolation, the silence, and the focus point of this unusual empty room, is acting as a powerful catalyst, potentially triggering a psychological episode, Dr. Hansen stated carefully. The phenomena you're describing, heightened paranoia, perceptual distortions, feelings of presence, auditory anomalies, are consistent with symptoms brought on by severe stress and sensory monotony or deprivation. Your mind, lacking sufficient external stimulus and under pressure, might be generating these experiences internally. She paused, choosing her words deliberately. Alex, do you have any personal or family history of psychosis? Or episodes of derealization or depersonalization, perhaps during times of extreme stress in the past? The question hung in the air. Alex felt a jolt of fear, mixed with indignation. No. Nothing like that. I've had anxiety, work stress, but never this. Never questioning reality like this. Okay, Dr. Hansen said, making a note. That's helpful to know. But extreme, prolonged isolation can push even psychologically robust individuals into unusual states of mind. Think of prisoners in solitary confinement, or explorers overwintering in Antarctica. Sensory deprivation can induce hallucinations and paranoid ideation. But Croft's email? Alex countered. He hinted the room was special, that it needed to be kept empty. Doesn't that suggest it's not just me? Mr. Croft sounds like an eccentric individual, Dr. Hansen conceded. His reasons for keeping the room empty could be numerous, philosophical, aesthetic, perhaps even based on his own sensitivities or anxieties. His cryptic message, arriving when you were already feeling uneasy, likely acted as a powerful suggestion, reinforcing your own developing paranoia. It provided an external hook for your internal state. She leaned forward slightly. Alex, I'm becoming increasingly concerned. The intensity of what you're describing, the perceptual distortions. This is moving beyond simple stress projection. How much longer is your lease? Another month, Alex mumbled, feeling a surge of despair. Leaving felt like admitting defeat, admitting madness. But staying. Have you considered leaving early? Dr. Hansen asked gently but firmly. Removing yourself from the environment that seems to be triggering these experiences might be the most effective course of action right now. I need to finish the novel, Alex protested weakly, though the book felt distant, unimportant compared to the looming presence down the hall. Your well-being is more important than the novel, "Alex," Dr. Hansen stated unequivocally. "Based on what you're telling me, remaining in that house, in that state of isolation and heightened fear, carries significant psychological risk. We need to consider practical steps. Can you contact the agency? Is breaking the lease an option?" Alex felt trapped. Leaving meant validating the fear, letting the room win. Staying meant risking. What? Complete mental breakdown? The rational framework Dr. Hansen provided was persuasive, clinical, logical. It explained everything away as internal, a product of stress and environment. Yet, it didn't fully extinguish the deep-seated conviction that the room itself possessed an objective, malevolent quality. The shifting shadows, the heavy presence, the resistance to being filled. Did stress alone account for the sheer consistency and specificity of these experiences? The session ended with Dr. Hansen urging Alex to seriously consider leaving, to prioritize safety and mental health, and to schedule another session very soon. Alex agreed numbly, the therapist's concerned face dissolving from the screen, leaving Alex alone again in the stark, silent house. The conversation had offered a rational explanation, a potential path out. But as Alex's gaze inevitably drifted towards the hallway, towards the unseen, empty room, the clinical diagnosis felt cold and insufficient, unable to fully capture the creeping, existential dread inspired by the unwavering, watchful void. The horror shifted, turning inward with terrifying intimacy. It was no longer just about the oppressive presence in the room, or the unsettling sounds near it. The room, or rather the profound silence emanating from it, began to speak, not with an audible voice, but with insidious whispers that seemed to bypass the ears entirely, planting themselves directly into Alex's consciousness. It started subtly, almost indistinguishable from Alex's own internal monologue, particularly the self-critical voice that often accompanied the writing process. Sitting at the laptop, struggling to focus, Alex would find thoughts drifting, circling back to the empty room. Then, a thought would surface, sharp and unwelcome: "You're failing. This book is empty, just like that room." Alex flinched, recognizing the familiar sting of creative insecurity, but the thought felt injected. As if it hadn't originated organically, but had been whispered silently from the direction of the hallway. Alex shook their head, trying to dismiss it as anxiety amplified by the environment. But it happened again. Later, while trying to distract themselves by tidying the already minimalist kitchen, another thought slid into their mind, cold and precise: "Silence is better than your pointless noise." Again, it felt alien. Harsher, more nihilistic than Alex's usual anxieties. And it seemed to carry the same heavy, still quality as the presence in the empty room. Alex stopped, hands hovering over the countertop, listening intently to the silence of the house. Was it imagination? Was the stress manifesting as intrusive thoughts? The whispers became more frequent, more personal, echoing Alex's deepest fears and insecurities with chilling accuracy. They weren't constant, but arrived unexpectedly, often when Alex's guard was down, or during moments of intense focus on something else, hijacking the train of thought. "No one is coming. You chose this isolation. You're truly alone here. That sound you heard? It wasn't a house settling. Croft knows what happens here. He left you to it. Look inside the room. Go on. See the truth. The emptiness is waiting. Your perceptions are fracturing. Can you trust what you see? What you hear? What you think?" These weren't commands, exactly, but insidious suggestions, questions designed to erode Alex's confidence, sanity, and grasp on reality. They preyed on the existing paranoia, amplifying it, giving it a chilling voice. The most disturbing aspect was their perceived origin. They didn't feel like internal anxieties bubbling up, they felt like transmissions received from the oppressive void down the hall. The room's silence wasn't empty, it was pregnant with these silent, corrosive messages. Alex tried fighting back, mentally shouting down the intrusive thoughts, repeating Dr. Hansen's rational explanations like a mantra: "It's stress. It's isolation. It's my mind." But the whispers felt too targeted, too specific, too resonant with the atmosphere of the house and the nature of the empty room itself. The fear shifted fundamentally. It was no longer just about a potentially haunted space or a looming external threat. The horror was becoming internalized, suggesting the room wasn't just passively radiating dread, but actively interfering with Alex's thoughts, exploiting vulnerabilities, subtly manipulating perception from within. The paranoia evolved from "what is in the room?" to "what is the room doing to my mind?" Alex tried playing music, loud, defiant rock music filling the stark house. For a while, the noise provided a buffer, drowning out the oppressive silence and the insidious mental intrusions. But the moment the music stopped, The silence rushed back in, heavier, more absolute, and the whispers seemed to return with renewed clarity, mocking the attempt to fill the void with sound. The nature of the whispers also began to change subtly. They started to hint at the room's own perspective, if such a thing were possible. Emptiness is purity. Presence is corruption. Stillness is strength. Movement is decay. You try to fill the void, but the void fills you. These felt less like personal attacks and more like pronouncements, fragments of a bleak, nihilistic philosophy emanating from the heart of the absence. They suggested the room wasn't just a passive void, but an entity with its own nature, its own ideology of nothingness. Alex's mental state deteriorated rapidly under this new assault. Distinguishing between genuine internal thoughts and the implanted whispers became increasingly difficult. The world felt thin, unreal. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a sophisticated psychological trap, with the empty room at its center, patiently dismantling Alex's sanity, one silent whisper at a time. The line between reality and paranoia wasn't just blurring, it felt like it was being deliberately erased by an unseen, silent force residing in the heart of the emptiness. The paranoia was no longer just about the empty room, it felt like it was coming from it. Driven by a desperate need for answers, for any external validation that wasn't just Dr. Hansen's clinical, and increasingly terrifying, diagnosis of a potential psychological break, Alex turned to the internet. The slow, unreliable connection became a lifeline, a tenuous link to a world outside the oppressive silence and the whispering void down the hall. The target, Silas Croft in the history of this isolated house. Information on Croft was scarce, fragmented, painting a picture of profound eccentricity and deliberate obscurity. Public records showed he owned several properties, mostly remote, minimalist structures like this one. There were no social media profiles, no recent photographs, only outdated business registry entries listing him as director of companies with vague names like Stillness Ventures or Void Properties. Digging deeper into archived local news sites and obscure online forums yielded slightly more texture, though still frustratingly opaque. A brief mention in an article about zoning disputes decades ago described Croft as a reclusive architectural theorist with unconventional ideas about space and psychology. Another forum post, buried deep in a discussion about minimalist architecture, mentioned Croft in connection with fringe philosophical movements focused on sensory deprivation, existential voids, and the aesthetics of absence. Someone speculated he conducted informal experiments in his properties, though on what or whom remained unsaid. There were whispers of family history, too, hints of mental instability tracing back a generation or two. One unverified anecdote spoke of Croft's grandfather, a man obsessed with silence who had allegedly spent his final years living in a single, completely soundproofed room. Was Croft continuing some strange family legacy? Or was this just local gossip clinging to a wealthy recluse? The lack of concrete information was maddening. Croft remained a ghost, deliberately withdrawn from the world, his motivations shrouded in ambiguity. Did his cryptic email stem from a genuine belief in the purpose of the empty room's stillness, perhaps tied to these fringe philosophies? Or was it the rambling of an unstable mind? Either possibility was deeply unsettling. Alex then shifted focus to the house itself. Using the address and cross-referencing with local council records, were available online, and more forum trawling, a patchy history emerged. The house wasn't as old as its modern shell suggested. It had been built in the late 70s, then extensively renovated by Croft about 10 years ago, stripping it back to its current minimalist state. More revealing, and chilling, were the fragments concerning previous tenants. There weren't many, the remote location and stark nature of the house didn't lend themselves to frequent occupancy. But Alex found two relevant threads on old community forums and rental review sites, most now archived and barely functional. One brief post from roughly 5 years ago read, "Anyone rented the White House out on Mill Road? Stayed there a month. Place has a weird vibe. Couldn't put my finger on it, just felt off. Glad to be out." Vague, but suggestive. Another, slightly more detailed comment from about 3 years prior, was more specific, Croft property on Mill Road. Do not rent. Isolation gets to you fast. And there's this one room they keep empty. Gave me the absolute creeps. Felt watched constantly. Left early, broke the lease. Landlord, or his agency, wasn't surprised. Just charged me the penalty. Something wrong with that place, especially that damn room. Alex stared at the screen, heart pounding, gave me the absolute creeps. Felt watched constantly. Something wrong with that place, especially that damn room. It wasn't just Alex. Someone else had felt it too. The paranoia, the feeling of being watched, specifically linked to the empty room. It wasn't just stress projection or incipient madness. Or, if it was a madness the house itself seemed capable of inducing. The reviewer mentioning the landlord wasn't surprised also stood out. Did Croft know the effect the house, or the room, had on people? Was the high turnover, the broken leases, part of his experiment? Was he studying the psychological effects of isolation and profound emptiness? The thought was horrifying, casting Croft not just as eccentric, but potentially manipulative, even cruel. Finding these fragments offered a strange mix of validation and intensified fear. Alex wasn't alone in experiencing the house's unsettling atmosphere. The empty room had affected others. But this confirmation also suggested the phenomenon wasn't purely internal. It lent credence to the idea that the room itself possessed some inherent quality, some influence that preyed on the minds of those isolated within its walls. The research provided context but no real answers. Croft remained an enigma. The house's history hinted at unease but offered no explanation for its source. Were Croft's philosophical leanings the key? Was the room designed according to some principle meant to induce altered states or psychological distress? Or was there something older, stranger, tied to the land itself, that Croft merely cultivated by maintaining the void? The fragmented information only deepened the paranoia, providing just enough external suggestion to validate Alex's deteriorating mental state without offering any clear path to understanding or escape. The research confirmed Alex wasn't the first to feel the dread, but offered no comfort, only the chilling implication that others had fled, while Alex remained, increasingly entangled in the room's silent, watchful influence. The empty room's influence shifted from passive emanation to active demand. It was no longer enough for Alex to simply feel its presence or hear its insidious whispers. The room now seemed to exert a powerful gravitational pull, compelling Alex's attention, drawing them towards its silent threshold with hypnotic insistence. The writing completely stalled. Alex would sit before the laptop, the document open, but the words wouldn't come. All mental energy, all focus, was being inexorably siphoned off by the awareness of the room down the hall. It was like trying to concentrate with someone standing just behind you, staring intently at the back of your head. Except the stare was coming from an empty space, a concentrated void. The compulsion to observe the room became overwhelming. Alex found himself pacing the hallway, pausing frequently by the closed door, hand hovering over the handle. The internal whispers intensified during these moments, urging Alex to open the door, to look inside, to engage with the emptiness. Just a glance. What harm could it do? Isn't it beautiful? The purity of the void. Maybe something has changed this time. It wants you to look. It needs your attention. Resisting the pull required immense mental effort, leaving Alex feeling drained and agitated. Giving in provided a temporary, uneasy relief, quickly followed by renewed anxiety. Alex would push the door open, heart pounding, and stare into the unchanging void. The moments stretched, Alex locked in a silent, obsessive communion with the bare walls and floor. The paranoia escalated into obsessive-compulsive behaviors centered around the room. Alex started measuring its dimensions repeatedly with a tape measure found in a kitchen drawer, convinced the space was subtly shifting, expanding or contracting in ways too small to perceive visually. The numbers always remained the same, 12 feet by 12 feet, 8 feet high, but the feeling persisted that the room's spatial integrity was fluid, unstable. Alex began analyzing the light and shadows with meticulous, almost forensic intensity. Tracking the slow crawl of sunlight across the concrete floor, noting the exact shape and density of the shadows cast by the window frame, convinced they were changing in unnatural ways. Was that shadow slightly deeper than yesterday? Did the light have a colder quality? Alex took photos with their phone, comparing them day by day, searching for minute discrepancies that were never quite there, yet the certainty of change remained. The texture of the white walls became another focus of obsession. Alex would run fingertips over the smooth, cool surface, searching for imperfections, bumps, or hollow spots, convinced the walls themselves were subtly altering, breathing, or concealing something just beneath the surface. Dr. Hansen's voice, recalled from their last session, echoed weakly: severe stress. Perceptual distortions. Psychological episode. The rational explanation was there, but it felt distant, irrelevant compared to the overwhelming immediacy of the room's demand for attention. Alex was no longer just observing the room, Alex was consumed by it. Every waking moment seemed to revolve around the empty space. Meals were eaten hastily, distractedly, the mind constantly returning to the room. Attempts to read or engage in any other activity failed, the pull of the void too strong. Sleep, when it came, was filled with geometric nightmares, endless white corridors leading back to the same empty room, the silence pressing in, the walls subtly warping. The house itself seemed to shrink, its other rooms fading into insignificance. The living area, the kitchen, the bedroom, they were just peripheral spaces, waiting areas outside the main event. The empty room was the heart, the core, the only thing that mattered. Alex felt trapped in a feedback loop of fear and compulsion. The room radiated dread, which fueled the paranoia. The paranoia manifested as obsessive observation. The obsessive observation focused Alex's attention back onto the room, strengthening its perceived influence. It was a downward spiral, pulling Alex deeper into the room's silent orbit. The feeling was no longer just that the room was watchful, it felt hungry. Hungry for attention, for focus, for Alex's dwindling mental energy. It demanded to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be the sole object of contemplation. And Alex, increasingly fragmented and exhausted, found it harder and harder to resist its silent, imperious call. The void wasn't just present, it was becoming all-encompassing, threatening to swallow Alex whole. The breaking point arrived not with a bang, but with a chilling, internal whisper that felt more decisive than any before: stop resisting. Come inside. Face the void. Something within Alex snapped. The constant tension, the escalating paranoia, the obsessive behaviors, the insidious whispers, it was too much. Running felt impossible, the room's influence too deeply ingrained. Rationalization had failed. Avoidance had failed. Trying to fill the space had failed. There was only one option left, terrifying as it was: confrontation. With a sense of grim, fatalistic resolve, Alex walked down the hallway. There was no hesitation this time. Alex pushed the door to the empty room wide open and stepped inside. Then, deliberately, Alex reached back and pulled the door shut, plunging the room into the dim, gray light filtering through the single window. The click of the latch echoed unnaturally loud in the sudden, profound silence. Alex was locked inside. Alone with the emptiness. The immediate sensation was overwhelming, far more intense than during the brief foray before. The heavy presence crashed down, a physical weight pressing on Alex's chest, making it hard to breathe. The silence was absolute, deafening, a tangible entity that seemed to absorb all thought, all sound, even the frantic beating of Alex's own heart. Alex stood rigidly in the center of the room, forcing himself to look, to really look, at the bare walls, the seamless floor, the indifferent window. It was still just an empty room. Visually, nothing had changed. But the feeling was unbearable. This was it. The heart of the dread. Alex waited for something to happen, for a shape to emerge from the shadows, for a voice to speak aloud. But nothing did. The horror wasn't about an external manifestation, it was about the crushing weight of the void itself and what it did to the mind trapped within it. Slowly, inevitably, Alex's internal state began to unravel. The silence amplified every flicker of anxiety, every dormant fear. The intrusive whispers returned, no longer subtle suggestions but a torrent of corrosive thoughts seemingly generated by the surrounding emptiness. Failure. The word echoed silently, resonating with the novel Alex had failed to finish. The life Alex felt was stalling. Alone. The isolation of the house became absolute, cosmic. No one knew Alex was in here. No one could help. Madness. The clinical diagnosis Dr. Hansen had hinted at felt suddenly, terrifyingly real. Was this it? The final fracture? Images began to flicker at the edges of Alex's vision, not hallucinations of monsters, but flashes of personal anxieties made manifest. The accusing face of a disappointed editor. The blank, unreadable expression of a loved one. Pages of the manuscript, completely blank, swirling like snow in the empty air. These weren't just thoughts, they felt like projections cast onto the canvas of the void by Alex's fragmenting psyche, amplified and reflected back by the room's oppressive emptiness. The geometry of the room seemed to subtly shift. The walls pulsed almost imperceptibly. The corners deepened, receding into impossible angles. The floor felt unstable, tilting slightly. Alex squeezed their eyes shut, trying to block it out, but the sensations persisted behind the eyelids, the room imprinting itself on the mind. Time lost meaning. Had Alex been in here for minutes or hours? The gray light through the window remained unchanged, offering no clue. The silence pressed deeper, threatening to extinguish thought itself, leaving only raw, primal fear. This wasn't a battle against a presence, it was a battle against absence. A confrontation with nothingness, and the terrifying realization that the nothingness wasn't inert, it was a mirror reflecting Alex's own internal void, amplifying it to an unbearable degree. The room didn't contain the horror, it was the horror. Its power lay in its perfect emptiness, its ability to strip away external references and force the mind to confront its own deepest fears, its own potential for dissolution. Alex sank to the floor, curling into a ball on the cold concrete, hands pressed against ears as if to block out the deafening silence. The whispers continued, relentless, indistinguishable now from Alex's own frantic, terrified thoughts. The confrontation wasn't about defeating something in the room, it was about surviving the encounter with the void itself, surviving the implosion of one's own mind under the immense pressure of absolute emptiness and isolation. Whether Alex could emerge intact, or if the void would claim them entirely, remained terrifyingly uncertain. The battle raged, silent and internal, in the heart of the unwavering, indifferent emptiness. How long Alex remained curled on the floor, besieged by the silence and the internal echoes of fear, was impossible to say. Time had fractured, dissolved into the oppressive stillness. There was no sudden catharsis, no dramatic banishment of the presence. Instead, there was a slow, dawning awareness of utter exhaustion, a depletion so profound it felt like the very core of Alex's being had been hollowed out. Slowly, unsteadily, Alex pushed himself up. The room remained unchanged. White walls, concrete floor, gray light. The heavy presence felt. Perhaps slightly less immediate, not gone, but as if its focus had momentarily shifted, sated by the intensity of the confrontation. Or maybe Alex had simply become numb to it, burned out by the psychological onslaught. With trembling legs, Alex stumbled towards the door, fumbling with the handle. It clicked open, revealing the familiar, blessedly mundane hallway. Stepping out of the empty room felt like surfacing, breaking through a membrane into a different reality, albeit one still tainted by the experience. Alex didn't pause, didn't look back. Driven by a primal instinct for self-preservation, Alex moves through the house like an automaton, gathering the laptop, keys, phone, stuffing a few essential clothes into a bag. The movements were jerky, hurried, fueled by the adrenaline of escape. The novel lay forgotten. The minimalist furniture seemed alien, hostile. The entire house felt contaminated by the influence of the empty room. Outside, the air felt blessedly fresh, real. Alex threw the bag into the car, started the engine with trembling hands, the sound a jarring intrusion into the profound quiet Alex had once craved. Without a backward glance at the star-quiet structure, Alex drove, gravel spitting beneath the tires, away from the isolated house, away from the watchful void. The drive back towards civilization was a blur. Alex stopped eventually at a brightly lit, noisy service station, the cacophony of traffic, chatter, and fluorescent lighting feeling both jarring and strangely comforting after the oppressive silence. Alex called Dr. Hansen, the words spilling out in a fragmented, exhausted rush, the confrontation, the escape, the overwhelming fear. Dr. Hansen listened patiently, her voice a calm anchor, urging Alex to find somewhere safe to rest, to check into a motel, promising to arrange an urgent in-person session. Alex found a generic motel room miles away, the cheap art on the walls and the hum of the air conditioning feeling like blessed clutter, blessed noise. Sleep was deep, heavy, dreamless, the sleep of utter collapse. In the days that followed, under Dr. Hansen's guidance, Alex began the slow process of trying to make sense of the experience. Was it a stress-induced psychological break triggered by isolation and the power of suggestion, amplified by an eccentric landlord and fragmented local law? Or had Alex truly encountered something inexplicable, an environmental anomaly, a space where profound emptiness possessed a tangible, malevolent influence? The ending remains ambiguous. Alex survived, escaped the house physically. But the experience left indelible marks. The paranoia lessened in the noise and distraction of the world, but a lingering unease remained, a fear of silence, of empty spaces, of the potential for the mind to fracture under pressure. Sometimes, in moments of quiet contemplation, Alex would feel a faint echo of that heavy, watchful stillness, a chilling reminder of the void. Did Alex overcome the paranoia, achieving a fragile sense of control by fleeing? Or was the escape merely a postponement, the empty room's influence now carried within, a seed of dread waiting for the right conditions, silence, isolation, stress, to bloom again? The final image isn't of Alex, recovering but scarred. It's of the isolated house, standing silent amidst the trees. Inside, the empty room remains. Unchanged. Unaffected. Its bare walls and floor pristine under the diffuse light. Its profound emptiness holds its secrets, utterly still, indifferent to the psychological wreckage left in its wake, its silent, watchful presence a terrifying testament to the ambiguous power of the void, whether real, imagined, or both. The question lingers, unanswered, unsettling: was the horror in the room, or in the mind that perceived it? Or does the truest horror lie in the blurring of that line? Enjoyed this story? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.